budget hearing for August the 7th, 2012. Is there any questions or comments about the budget?
I move to close the budget hearing.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Thank you. Call your regular council meeting to order for August 7th, 2012.
Would you join me? Father, we thank you for your city council. Thank you for those who give willingly of their time for such a oftentimes thankless job that they do. We ask that you bless them for their time. We ask that you bless the city of St. John and be with each one tonight. Give them voice to speak. Make them slow to speak, quick to listen. We ask your blessing, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay. Any additions to the agenda?
Under administration, we'd like to call for a 10-minute executive session for personal matters, non-elected personnel.
Which administration, John or Mel?
Mel.
Mel?
Yes.
Okay. How long?
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Yes.
I would like to add under Mel to have Tia Smith and Allison Smith speak this evening. And then we will also add an executive session to that, a 10-minute executive session after they speak. And if we could, let's move the police department up in front of citizen comments. Is there any other additions?
Move to approve the additions to the agenda.
Second.
All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Right.
Oh, did we have some additions on that paper?
That's
People
the
sign in.
citizens'
That's
comments.
Okay.
citizen comments.
Okay.
Okay. Consent agenda.
To approve the minutes of the regular meeting of July 17, 2012, approve appropriation 0727-2012 in the amount of $20,706.24. Approve appropriation ordinance 0801-2012 in the amount of $9,571.54. Approve appropriation ordinance 0807-2012 in the amount of $88,180.88. And slurry seal in the amount of $53,647.36.
Is there any questions? Approved?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Thank you. Police Department, Adam.
As per requested last meeting, I have gave John copies of a policy for tasers that you'd like to see, as well as curfew. So I would like to come back to this meeting, ask you to approve the purchase of the tasers that we talked about last meeting, and then give your thoughts and ideas on curfew.
I'm looking over the ordinance that you provided for us, one from Stafford and the other one from Ellenwood. I don't know if the rest of what the other council thinks, but I like the city of Ellenwood, like that one. The wording, it can be changed a little bit here and there, but I like that one. I like some of the exceptions to the ordinance on that. I don't know what the rest of the council feels. Have you had a chance to go over it and look?
Yeah, I would agree. Those are the two that I had. I thought Stafford was a little, it's kind of wacky,
Yeah.
just for lack of a better word.
the ordinance from Ellenwood explains it straight out, gives you everything on this, so I think that's the one I would go with.
I think maybe it'd just be wise to hand it over to Don and have him write it up
That'd be fine.
if we approve.
If we approve this one, yeah?
We haven't had a curfew in place, correct?
No, we have not.
That's not what my dad always told me. The city curfew, you better be home.
If it works, it works. Sucker. Okay. Any other comments? So we'll let Dawn look at that and might want to enforce on. Okay. Tasers. Is this the kind that the county has, Adam?
Yes. Be the exact same thing. And same with Stafford, with the exception of the camera on the bottom, but I've already purchased and we've got in the body worn cameras.
Okay.
Adam, this General Order 56, is this ours, or is this just a,
That would be the policy that it would be operated under. Yes.
I'm sorry, what?
That would be the policy they would be operated under.
Okay, so we haven't adopted this one yet?
No,
Okay.
no, you guys wanted an example of, or, you know, what it would be, and that would be the policy they would be adopted, or that they would be used under.
Okay.
Which is, in essence, somewhat of a supplement and in correlation with our existing use of force policy.
I advise council that we table this. Dawn just got handed those policies and stuff, so he hasn't seen them till this now.
For
So,
the curfew?
No.
Either
Well,
one.
either
one,
one,
okay.
yeah. So that's my bad. If that's okay with council?
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that.
Table.
Yes, sir. Did you have something, Mike?
No, I'd like the table.
Okay,
I'll have a chance to look at it.
okay. All right. Any other thing, Adam?
Unless somebody has anything for me.
I have one question for you, Adam. What is the procedure when a theft or attempted theft is reported?
To investigate it.
Okay, is there any reports taken down, anything written up on it?
On what?
On if somebody reports a theft or an attempted
Yes.
theft?
Yes,
Okay.
we do. Any calls for dispatch to self-initiated activity, anything, the reports them.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
Another question on these tasers, are we talking about one for each vehicle? Are we talking about two or three?
That was up to council, either one, and then it handed over to the next officer, or two or three.
Well, it was,
Okay, go ahead.
we had discussed one per officer or two, one for each vehicle.
Okay.
So it would be 2 or 4.
And I didn't bring my prices tonight either, so I have those from last night.
Adam, is that something you really think St. John needs?
Yeah, it is. If I didn't think we didn't need it, I wouldn't have bothered bringing it.
Do you have your figures from the last meeting, council?
Yes.
Okay, I have mine, so I can run them off.
Well, or I can put it in your next packet again.
Okay. That would be good. Okay. Is there any questions for Adam? Thank you, Adam. Okay, some comments. Grant, Miller.
Yes.
Support?
Do I just speak from right here?
It doesn't matter if you want to, or you can speak from right here.
Perfect. I am presenting health and wellness to the city more than anything.
Grant, why don't you come up here so the camera can see you and
Sure.
the TV can see you?
Yes. For the city council, I am going to present health and wellness. I now have my own gym. It is open to the city, to the public, to the surrounding communities. What I have presented is I do not have any competition within 20 months. None, zero. I am the only gym with a 27 access. It's not 24/7, it is 27, which means I close from 5 a.m. and close at 1 a.m., reopen at 5 a.m. What this does is it enables people that work late to come in and work out. Yes, we have the lodge. Yes, the lodge is great, but the hours are there for those certain people. I can print off a report of people when they attend. I do have people working out at 9, 10, 11, and sometimes midnight. So what I am presenting to the council is if we could get either the council or the city to pay for either full or half the membership, which is $16.10 with tax per person, $16.10. If we could get that to pay for their membership, aka police, EMT, fire force, anything in that, people that serve us, I think we should serve them as a city, as members. I mean, more than anything, if I was in a house burning down, I want to know if firemen can bust through a door, bust through a wall if they have to. They don't have their own workout facility. I mean, I had to ask some of the police force and everybody, do you guys have, I figured you guys did. I really did. I thought you guys had your own facility where they could work out. They don't. So what I'm wanting to entail is this being a part of their facility. So I am looking into expansion. Right now I am small. As more people attend, the more I can go. I'm working towards more grants. I've gotten one. I'm working towards more. So if I can get to the expansion to where I can turn this into a fitness center, aka you're going to have healthier employees. It's going to be lack of obesity. I mean, obesity is one of the biggest things we're fighting these days. Heart disease, any health problems, diabetes. It's going to help in the long run, plus it can save money with insurance premiums. I'm just going to cut it right there. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask.
1610 is a
monthly fee.
A monthly fee.
A monthly fee.
And that's the full amount, right?
That's the full amount.
Okay.
Per month, per person. Because I do a EMT, EMS, nurse, doctor, discount, teacher, student, and then everybody else is $18 plus tax, $19.34. And I'm just wanting to help them. And I can, by all means, get any feedback from them. For those that are attending, I can, by all means, I'll help you guys out there. I can have a request box for feedback. I am on the internet. I can have anybody put any kind of comments in there, and I can, once again, give you guys more information of what the city has as members more than anything, and non-members.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Where's this located at, Grant?
It is southeast of the courthouse, right behind the annex building. Good.
Terry's happening.
I could pass on mine since Trish is on there and take her to find out the same thing.
Okay. Trish, where you at?
Right here.
Get up here, sweetie.
A couple of things. First off, thank you again for your support for the Hot Summer Night. The last one is the 18th. We're going to midnight on that one. So just a reminder, we had about 65 people at the last one. So I think that was good. Our last one usually is a right from school. School starts all the way. It's big. So again, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Did the city, I know the city pledged us $200. Did you guys ever miss this?
So we have to look. I know it was
They
said.
get one.
Okay, well, we'll give
Okay, I know it's kind of rude to ask, but.
You should have balance your now.
I was just concerned maybe it got sent someplace wrong or wrong. You guys probably ought to know. Just in
Yeah.
case
Bids
that
that already
happens.
spent it. Actually, I have two other things I want to bring up. One is, I guess the city's been going through town and fixing streets and putting asphalt down. Patching. And thank you. It's really noticeable when you drive around town. I've heard other people comment about it. It's nice. There were some nasty potholes in town, so thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Well, we're going to do our slurry seal, that's one of the first things.
Oh, is that, just
That's
everything
prep
on
work.
top of it? It works for me. It's just like it is. So.
Every year, right?
Yeah.
And we patch other times of the year, and then sometimes, some things pop out, we try to get through.
That's nice. The other thing is that John and I had a conversation yesterday, and we just kind of need to get all on the same page of what our code of procedure is. I had called in late because, I was late. She reminded me, well, what the procedure is for getting on the agenda. My thing was, okay, well, fine, I'll just do it under city comments. John relayed that, well, I need sponsorship for that. And I'm going, no, that's what all this was about. So I just think we just kind of need to get all on the same page if possible.
Right. And we brought that up this evening, and that's to my understanding. I thought, but I don't know that I was here that night when council did the procedures, but I thought we was going to do it like Stafford did, that you have a sign-up sheet and whoever wants to speak on citizen comments may speak.
Right, and then you can limit their
Yeah,
time.
and if
Right.
there's a bunch of 30 or 40 people, then we limit the times to
Right.
however many if it's on the same subject.
Okay,
So-
so that's what,
Yeah.
because that is
And
how
I need to
code
look back
reads.
in the minutes, because when we were discussing that, Robert's Rules of Orders came back up, and so I don't know if there was ever any real motion made on that, but I will check, so that if it hasn't been, we can get it settled. And it could be
Well,
just
the
that
code
I,
was rewritten.
The code was rewritten. I rewrote
It
it,
did-
and
I
I
know.
passed it on to Don, and he embellished a
and
little
did
on it.
we
And
approve it then? Because that's when Robert's Rules of Orders came.
as far as I know, it was approved.
Okay. And I'll look that up.
I'm not sure, because I thought it was on that, but that's okay, we'll look it up and we'll try to get it correct.
We decided to just go with it tonight, just
It
because.
works for me, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I call you tomorrow about the check?
Yes. I wish you would have called earlier.
Well, I don't know, you
Thank you.
Yes, you're fine. Fire department, Michael.
I don't have anything.
So any questions for Michael this evening?
Have Michael, have we gotten anything back from for the piece of machinery we approved last year?
The camera?
Yes.
Yeah, we received it probably in May, I believe.
Okay. And has there been any training on it with any of the firefighters, or?
We've all played with it, but we haven't had a chance. We'd already burnt the house that we wanted to train in, so we haven't had a chance to use it, which is a good thing.
Okay. And it's over at the.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
One of these I'd like to get with you and
Yeah.
take a look at it.
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, is there any other questions for Adam? Sorry. For Michael? Thank you. Administration, Mel?
Tonight we have Chris Nagley with Utility Help Net Incorporated. He's here to report on the completed electrical system assessment for the city. This was in the first part of it, getting us ready to hopefully get some grant money to help with some projects. So Chris, if you want to just go ahead.
Come on up, Chris. There's some information for Bruce. These are Chris's papers, so you would like them back?
No, you can.
Okay.
Do it for you.
Have you sit down? Stand up?
I don't mind sitting there.
No, that's fine. Whatever works for you.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening, kind of give you an update on the report we've done. My name is Chris Megley. I'm a chief engineer at Utility Help Net. We're a engineering consulting firm that spends most of our time and efforts dealing with cities like you. All of our focus, probably 80% of our projects are with small to medium-sized municipals, and that's where we put our focus at. So that's we've done some work for the city in the past and neighboring communities, and so we're fairly familiar with the area out here. So, as I kind of go through some of these points, if you have a question, feel free to stop me. This is pretty casual, so if I say something that doesn't make sense to you, just stop me and we'll go over it. One of the charges that we were asked to do is to take a look at the city's electrical system, both from the generation and the distribution system, give an assessment on what kind of condition it's in. Are there some projects out there that we need to be looking at in the short term? What would it take to get the system up to a highly reliable status, and what kind of opinions of probable cost would it take to get to that point in preparation for some of the grant funding opportunities that may exist out there. So as we go through there, another part that, in addition to that, is there are some codes and procedures that maybe have came out in the last several years that a lot of the communities aren't necessarily familiar with, and so I want to make council aware of some things that maybe you need to be thinking about as you pass city ordinances and codes that you need to be following. One of those things is, quite often everybody passes the National Electric Code as the standard to follow for buildings. Well, there's a second code out there, the National Electric Safety Code, and that's actually what governs the utility market, the electric and the communications side of things. That's the standards that go in place for the overhead power lines, underground power lines, and any communications that go on the poles. It's become more commonplace, and it's a pretty good idea to adopt the National Electric Safety Code as a standard for the city to follow also. And the reason, especially when you have joint use poles where you maybe have cable or other communications on the same pole as your electric system, if there's any conflicts on there, the code gives you the clearances, the standards that you need to follow. And so by adopting that standard, says we're going to build to the National Electric Code, that eliminates a lot of sources of conflict with potential people that want to come in and make attachments. You're really governed by it anyway, whether you adopt it or not, but by doing the formal adoption, you know, it's just like the National Electric Code. You're going to follow those guidelines anyway, so you need to adopt the formal standards. The other thing that came out of the December 2007 ice storm is the way FEMA handles their reimbursements in a declared storm. And there's two aspects of that weren't in place before that ice storm. What they're asking cities to have, or any applicant, could be a co-op as well, is two documentations. One is, what is the condition of your system prior to the storm, and documentation to support that. You need maps, you need records. What did it look like, and what were your construction standards? And those construction standards is, how do you typically build lines? The reason for that is there have been some utilities in the past that maybe took advantage of the situation to build back better than they ever would have done in absence of federal assistance. And so what they said is, we want to know how you're building before anything bad ever happens, and prove to us that that's really how you build. And then when it comes to asking for federal funds, you say, here's our construction guidelines, we adopted that years ago, these are projects that we built, here's examples of it, here's the condition of our city before we had anything happen. It's very easy to come down and do an assessment afterwards if you have, here's what it was before.
So if we were to adopt the National Electric Safety Code, then we could say we follow
That's part of it.
this code.
So there's that function of it, and also a line construction standards, which means this is the type of pole we install, this is how we frame it, this is the strengths we use. And there are some standards out there. You can either customize them to your own city, you can adopt the Rural Electric Cooperative standards, the RUS standards, and I've talked about that a little bit, or you can develop some of your own. In absence of doing any kind of a lot of engineering work and code work in the short term, it's probably worthwhile, because you pretty well build to the rural cooperative standards anyway. Your normal standard is very, very close to that. And so that would be a very short-term adoption and a simple way to get in the market and say, hey, at the very least, we're going to build to that code. And that's how the co-ops build too. they ran into a problem, and FEMA didn't even want to reimburse any of the co-ops after that storm because they didn't have a formal adopted thing that says we follow our own code. Even though they can't borrow any money unless they follow the code, they didn't have that one extra step that said, yes, this is what we follow. I mean, you know how the government is, the higher up in the bureaucracy, everything's got to have the T's crossed and the I's dotted, all that. So
By adopting this just pretty much builds a stronger case for the city if and when this happens to the city. Okay.
Yeah. So, like I say, for a very low cost, if you adopt the standards that are already published, then you're not paying somebody like me to develop a set of standards for you. You know, I welcome that. I'd be happy to do that. I've done that for other cities, but in absence, you know, realistically, get something out there at least.
Right.
And so, I would encourage you to follow up that in the near future and look at those, the actual procedures for how to do it. I don't know how that happens, but you guys do. So I just know it has to adopt all the formal procedures that we don't do. So. Another area is joint pole use agreements. Making sure that there is a code adopted for how those are done, who pays the bills, how much you charge for attachments. If that attachment causes a violation of a code, who pays for those changes. The safety code says that if communications attaches to a pole and violates the code, the electric utility has to fix it. Now, they don't say who has to pay for it, but it says the electric utility has to fix it. So there's some gotchas in there, and there again, that's why you need to make sure that if all those codes are adopted and you have a policy in place that says if you attach to our pole and you cause a violation that we have to fix, you got to pay for it, or you work out something, you know, whatever it is, it is. But you need to have that stuff written out to eliminate all disputes if you have it. And again, if you have that stuff out ahead of things, it just eliminates any potential issues that you have. And that applies to any attachment, whether it be flags, communications, wireless transceivers, anything that might happen in the future. Any attachment to that pole may fall under that classification of a pole attachment. So, of someone other than the city who owns the pole. I don't remember, we discussed it, I think, earlier on the pre-meeting, but do you have a formal policy yet on customer-owned generation? Yes. Okay, net metering and all that? Okay. I put that in there because I couldn't find that in my notes, but if that's already adopted, that's not an issue. And then one other thing I want to talk about before we get into the actual assessment is one of the operational issues required of anyone working around energized electrical equipment is the whole arc hazard analysis question. And what that says in a fairly simple form is before you work on anything that's energized electrically, that person, that team, that crew has to perform an arc hazard analysis. And the gist of that is what hazards are present, what's the potential for an arcing event, and what magnitude of arcing event. Is it just a little bitty flash, or is it a great, huge, tremendous flash? And what type of proper protective equipment do I need to don before performing any of those tasks? Well, before that person can make that evaluation, then you need to have some sort of analysis done that would calculate what size of a flash. Are we talking about a little issue or a great big issue? That needs to be done. That data needs to be available so your employees or anyone working for the city, whether it be in a building or on power lines or anywhere else, can make those kind of judgments before they start work. If they're working on a city-owned building or a school, the city needs to be able to provide that information to any of the contractors that says this is what the potential is at this location, so they can make that determination. This has actually been in the code for a few years. that whole arc hazard analysis study is something that there are some code books that you can follow that are general rules of thumb. Almost everyone is getting away from the general rules of thumb because they're finding that the tables don't really cover all the situations, and it really requires an engineering study to be completed that takes into account all the variables in your particular system. There's just too many variables out there to just give a generic answer. So that's an arc hazard study, and that's included later in this assessment of what all is involved in that. But that is a requirement from the National Electric Safety Code, the National Electric Code, NFPA 70E, which is the arc hazard code, and the Code of Federal Register 29 CFR 1910, which is the labor portion of the federal regulations on labor. That's a lot of stuff, I know, but any questions on that? I'll touch on that maybe a little more. Let's talk about the actual electrical assessment. The way I approached this study is to, like I say, try to identify any potential projects or deficiencies that we found on the system. I spent some time with Nick and Mel, talked about different projects that they had been working on, ideas that they had had. We went around the system and showed me some areas that they knew about. After that, I spent most of the rest of the day and another day driving around the system, looking at poles, looking at wire, looking at your generation configuration, cooling towers, transformers, all that, to try to get a good feel for where you're at right now as a utility. This report is the summary of that, and we'll kind of go through this page by page. I'll try not to take too much time here, but there's a fair amount of information here. First of all, you receive power from Midwest Energy at a substation on the edge of town, down by the power plant. The only deficiency there is the transformer that actually feeds the city is undersized. You're actually overloading that transformer during peak times. We've discussed that a little bit. We need to have some conversations with Midwest Energy this fall probably, and see if we can come up with some resolution, whether they get a replacement transformer and a bigger one, what kind of costs may be involved with that, if any, to the city. But you've been through at least 2 or 3 summers with this unit on there. Your peak continues to be over the load, over the capacity of that transformer, and it really needs to be replaced before you have a significant outage there that, you know, would take some time to replace. And then it's bound to happen on the hottest day of the year. And even though you have local generation that can back up, you really don't want to run it for something like that and incur those costs. So that's something that I highly encourage you come up with a resolution before next summer. Off peak it's fine, but during the summertime it's at capacity nearly every day.
So, is that Mel's job to contact Midwest Energy, or who contacts them? To do not contact?
Yeah, I mean that would be
Yeah,
the
we
starting
can
point.
contact. We have talked to them, and they are aware of our situation.
Okay.
I mean, this isn't something that had just come up. And they've known, you know, they know what size we've got there, and they know what our load is and everything. And these last 2 summers were really, you know, we're up there when on the hottest days, we were up there, yes.
But like any utility, sometimes they need a little additional prodding. If they know counsel behind it saying, you know, hey, this isn't just, this is the whole administration that wants to get this resolved. And,
So hopefully install now.
Well, I can talk to them soon. I mean, we, you know, need to put,
Okay.
you know, a little more pressure on them right away so they can be thinking about it, so see where they're at on it.
So let's go to the city-owned generation. You have 3 generators. The capacity of all 3 generators is a little over 5 megawatts. Your system peak is about 3.5 megawatts. So you have good adequate capacity to meet the existing demand and some future growth. Typically, 2 out of the 3 can carry your city load most all year round. There's times that even a single unit can carry the city load. It's a good condition to be in. All the units appear to be very well maintained, are all in general operating condition. The problem with the generators as they exist today are the new air quality regulations that go into effect next May. It's May of 2013. None of the units meet that new guideline. What that means is after that time, units are basically only allowed to operate in what they call an emergency situation. An emergency would mean that the source from Midwest Energy is not available. So if it's a total blackout, you can run your generation all you want. They don't care it pollutes if it's an emergency. And now this applies to all generation. This includes backup generation at hospitals. They fall under this regulation as well, but they have some. They almost always operate as an emergency unit. So this regulation really applies when you're operating in parallel with the grid, like you do many summer days to shed load or for voltage support. When you're called on to generate by the utility, you need to be in compliance with the air quality after May 2013. So what that means is there needs to be basically a catalytic converter added to each of the engines to improve the air quality out of that, just pretty much like you have on your vehicle, just the industrial size version. There is a proposal that won't be adopted until March of next year, but is highly likely to be accepted, that will allow operation of these units up to about 50 hours a year without making these changes up to 2017. But after that time, everybody has to be in compliance anyway. So what they're trying to do is allow some communities some additional time. These rules really kind of finally got formally adopted about, I want to say, 4 or 5 months ago when they got the formal adoption. Then everybody had to be in compliance within a year. Well, that's a lot of engines around the country, like 100,000 engines or something that need to be in compliance in 12 months. Well, that's pretty unrealistic. Just from, there's only certain people that can actually install these, you know, and so they're all pretty busy. So the longer you wait to make a decision, the tougher it's going to be to make that 2013. The problem with waiting and falling into that exception time zone from 13 to 17 would be if you ever go over that 100 hours a year, then you immediately go into the zone of you can no longer call these exempted units. You must immediately then say, okay, we're going to bring them in compliance or we're going to shut them down. So you can operate them up to 100 hours. You go up to 105 hours. They say, oh, well, this wasn't a standby unit at all. Obviously, you use this every day. You need to be in compliance 100%. So if you get into a situation where you need to be shedding load every day for several days in a row, that could catch up with you.
That's classified as an emergency to me.
Well, you know, we've kind of discussed that. If we figure out how to kill power into town at that same time, then it's all emergency and those hours don't count. So, but, yeah, it's a significant event. It's a significant amount of money for no additional return other than the air quality issues. This has been fought at the state and federal level quite extensively. KMEA, KMU, KPP have all lobbied and have got this additional exception, the 2013 to 2017 exception added that wasn't in there a few months ago. But it's still, and it was primarily the Kansas contention that really got that sold, by the way. So your Kansas group and the members that you belong to actually sold that at a federal level. So that's a project that will need to be looked at real seriously, and most likely you just need to be compliant. It's just one of them things. there's a proposal, the city has received a bid to actually do that work. We'll go over that in a little bit. There's 2 cooling towers at the plant, one for each of the 2 larger engines. One of those is in, I would say, poor condition and requires a significant amount of maintenance. The other one is in fair condition. It is serviceable. The one unit probably is in the 1 to 3 year replacement time frame without significant repairs. The other one is probably a little farther out, but it will need to be replaced at some point. The controls on the generator are basically the original controls with the engine. That's basically a 1950s design style. It's actually a very robust style, very reliable, but it's not real highly accurate. So you're going to, when you're running on that kind of generation, you could expect your voltage to fluctuate a little bit and your frequency to go a little bit, so your lights will go a little dimmer, a little brighter, but it just sits there and runs and runs and runs. So one thing that we're saying here as a possible upgrade is update the controls with modern electronic controls that will hold that frequency and voltage a little more stable when you're in those situations where you're running off the grid. They are serviceable, they do work, they can be maintained, and they can run for a lot of years, but to get to that extra amount of power quality, it really requires the next level of sophistication in the control scheme. Any questions on the generation?
No, don't we, but the only time we run a generator is in an emergency situation, isn't that not
Well,
correct?
we've been called on this summer to run on days when Midwest Energy's been short on power, or there's been a unit down somewhere else on one of their suppliers, so we do run other times. Not very often, but
Not very
we have been called upon, so. And there's, you know, we were talking earlier today, usually when we get called, it's because a larger generation facility has a problem, and so it's up to us to make up our own. So it could happen, I mean, you could have a problem at a big plant and it could be weeks. I mean, we could really, hopefully that never happens, but I mean, it sure could, so.
Well, at that point in time, if it's not an emergency, then we don't run. Correct?
Well, if we don't run, if they say that they're not gonna be able to supply our needs for that day, or whatever they're gonna limit us to, we have to make it up.
And that don't classify as an emergency?
That's part of our contract.
No.
No. They could, Midwest Energy could, we don't have a firm contract with Midwest Energy. They can call us at any time and say, not available, and we have to pick up the city's load. So that really wouldn't be considered an emergency. If we lose our complete tie through, you know, a storm, or, you know, some other problem on a line down or whatever, that's, you know, considered an outage, and we could run under generation. But just to pick up our load or whatever because they're short or something like that, really, my understanding, right, Chris, that wouldn't be classified as an emergency.
Yeah, that was debated a lot at the federal level, just for that same thing. Well, it's an emergency to us, right? I mean, it wasn't planned by you as the city, you know, to have to generate, but that's not the EPA, that's not the guidelines as it exists today. That basically says it's not available for mechanical reasons, for lack of a better term. It's just not available. They consider that an economic decision, not an emergency. If you have the capability to run and you're running for economics or convenience, that doesn't count as an emergency.
And am I right that the standards are for generation only, or is it all diesel engines?
There are actually all diesel engines, actually all engines. There are requirements for gas engines, for natural gas engines, and for diesel engines. Differing amounts that have come into place, but the ones that are applying here are the ones for the stationary engines, are the guidelines we're talking about now. But yeah, they did actually put some, I mean, the ultra low sulfur diesel issue that came up a few years ago, That's part of this whole thing also, is to reduce the emissions out there. That all of the refineries had to go and start producing ultra-low sulfur diesel, and all the on the road tractors had to switch over to ultra-low sulfur diesel. So that's just, this is the next phase of air quality, is now they're talking about the stationary engines.
What's the difference between the requirements for diesel and natural gas?
They just, I don't know I don't remember the specifics right off the top of my head, but one's a spark ignited unit, one's a compression ignited unit, and they have different regulations for the amount of emissions that they're allowed to emit.
Natural gas is a very clean burning gas.
But they do have different exhaust gas emission regulations that have to be followed on those engines too.
Do they have to have catalytic converters on them?
Not the same kind of a thing. It's a different kind of a catalyst because you got a different fuel there. But there are some dual fuel units that would use like diesel fuel as a pilot gas to ignite the natural gas, and those do have to have a catalytic converter also.
Thank you.
Any other generation questions? Okay, we'll talk about the overhead power lines. The electrical system is a 4,160 volt system. The city operates with 5 distribution circuits, all fed from the power plant. The switchgear and all the facilities at the power plant, again, are in very good condition, been well maintained. I couldn't find the exact installation date, but we figured it was sometime late 80s, early 90s. Sometime you would expect to get at least a 40 to 50 year life cycle out of the equipment that's installed. So, I don't see any significant reasons to make any changes there at the supply side of your distribution system for 10 to 20 years, other than minor maintenance issues. Once you get out on the overhead line, the system is in generally good condition. I would say that of the overall, there's about 1,200 poles in the system, plus or minus. Of that, I would say probably in the neighborhood of 10 to 20% maximum, I would consider at the end of their useful life. So there's 100 poles on your system that probably should be replaced today. There's probably another 20% over that are at the end of their life. Probably have some service life, but need to be certainly in the next 5 to 10 years replaced. That's actually very good. It may sound like a lot, but that's actually a system that's in fairly good condition. I know the city has been very aggressive over the last 10 years of upgrading wire, upgrading poles, replacing poles as needed, and has done a very good job of maintaining it. But there are a few areas, the northwest part of town, there's some old copper conductor that's brittle, and windstorms and ice storms, it's going to break, it's going to fall down, it's going to be an issue putting it back up. We recommend replacing all that with newer aluminum conductor, steel core reinforced. And the support poles in that area also to be all replaced. There are a few poles here and there at different places that also need to be replaced. And when we get into the proposal, I'll kind of go over that a little more. But there again, I would say you're 70-30 to the good. I'd say 70% of your system is in good to very good condition, and you have about 10 to 30% of it that needs some attention. It's very well maintained. I threw the system losses in here just as a point of reference, and that is at a 4,000 volt system, your system losses, your calculated system losses, that's just what it takes to keep the system energized, not supply any load. Probably costs you between $15,000, $20,000 a year just to keep everything on, but not supply anything. If you were to raise the system voltage from 4,000 volts to 12,000 volts, you increase that efficiency by a factor of 9. Cut the current by 3, you make it more efficient by a factor of 9, you probably save $10,000, $15,000 a year. But to do that, you're going to spend $800,000 to upgrade your system to that higher voltage. So the return on investment is questionable in the short term. It's probably something you want to look at as a really long-term project. There are ways you can get there cost effectively. You can buy dual voltage transformers that you can operate at 4 kV today. And if you ever get to the point where you can convert it over, you can flip a switch on it and operate it at the higher voltage. That's probably a reasonable investment to make. The city's been doing some of that in the past. And that's probably a good philosophy to have. Then you're planning for the future, but you're not having a huge outlay at one time to make that happen. You can also go with higher efficiency transformers and higher efficiency street lighting. Street lighting is oftentimes a pretty good source with some of the new LED and fluorescent lighting out there. Even in the street light world, you can street lights really add up on a system pretty crazily fast sometimes, depending on how many you have out there. And so they are getting some better fixtures on the market. First generation, like anything, is probably a little questionable of reliability, but they're getting better out there. So I would encourage the city, as you replace fixtures, to look at the high efficiency options. There have been some grants from time to time that you need to kind of keep aware of for energy efficiency upgrades that have allowed some communities to upgrade to LED lighting, fluorescent lighting, with some matching grant funds. So, any questions about that, the operation, the general assessment? We'll go ahead and get over some of the specific recommendations then. I've got, with the exception of the first two items here, these are all opinions of probable cost. They're not necessarily based on 100% design efficiency, so you could expect the final number to vary depending on what the final scope is, desired and approved and designed into the system. The first item is what we discussed earlier, is getting a record of what you got, preparing a set of maps for the city. You have a hand-drawn map that the city guys have been maintaining over at the power plant, but it's just showing where the lines are. It doesn't show the size or type of conductor. It doesn't show any pole locations. So it really wouldn't meet the qualifications of what FEMA would want to see as what you really had out there. The other, what we're proposing here is to come in and map. If there's good street maps, we'll use them. If not, we'll create our own. Get the size and type of pole, every transformer location, every fuse location, the type and size of the wire in the air. And you get a couple things with that. You meet the FEMA guideline. You also have a valuation of what your system is worth today and what the replacement value might be in the event of a natural disaster. The second item, the price for that is $10,000. That's a proposal price if it hired us to do it. The second item there is the arc hazard study. That's the data necessary and the training necessary for your system to know what the arc hazards are. And this would be for all the overhead power lines. It would be at the water, wastewater pumping locations, so that really any of the city employees that were working on any of their equipment would have the information they need to make that assessment for all the city-owned facilities around. And it would also give you the source data needed if any electrician came to you and said, what's the condition at this point in your system? You could then have a document that says, here's what we've calculated it to be, and they can do their own assessment then. The price for that arc hazard study is $6,500. And that's a proposal from us, our company, Utility Health Net Partner. So that's a firm fixed price, but some of these others are just some estimates based on talking with some vendors and some similar things. To upgrade the generator exhaust system to meet RICE compliance is $175,000. That's for all 3 units. That was a proposal by Excellent. Thank you. I couldn't think of it. I'm trying to tip on my tongue there. So that's their bid price. plus some administration costs in there to integrate into your monitoring SCADA system and everything. That's a pretty good price there too. I mean, as far as a fairly firm price, I wouldn't expect that to vary much from that.
Any idea what the administration cost would be?
Their bid was $163.50 or something, so there's about 10,000 of overhead. That could vary. That's probably on the high side. Basically, you need to take their monitors, integrate it into your SCADA system so it gets recorded and historized automatically. So you have the records recorded every time you run, what the emissions are, all the things that monitor captures.
And that's all included in?
That's all included in that 175, yeah.
So we could update them catalytic converters on all 3 of them engines for $175,000, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Including labor, everything.
Yeah, that's
Turnkey deal.
That was installed.
Yep.
Installed turnkey deal.
and the initial compliance test that says we meet the compliance.
And that's included in it.
Not
Yep.
one catalytic converter, all 3.
That's all 3.
Okay.
And we can do that separately from anything else on the ship?
Absolutely. All these projects are pretty much independent of each other.
Thank you. How long is that price guaranteed for?
I did ask for an upgrade from X-Line on that original price, which was about a year ago, and I haven't got it back yet. I'm sure everyone is in the same boat. You know, we are trying to get everything kind of nailed down, but
Some of those prices have gone up too with all the high demand of all these engines going up and the same requirements.
Yeah, and that might be it. And there are other companies that do it.
and the OP down there, one of the larger items on the cost was it, due to its location so close to the power plant wall and everything, there's not room to actually get a catalytic converter put in between the engine and the muffler, so it has to be a complete unit muffler catalytic converter altogether. So
Okay, I assume that's in here.
yeah, that's all in. That's everything.
Yeah. Like I said, there may be some escalation costs, but I wouldn't expect it to appreciably change from this amount. And that's pretty much in line with what I've seen from other cities and communities for engines similar to this.
Well, it's pretty common on a bid, give or take 10%.
Yeah. The next item here is some improvements on the overhead circuits. As I mentioned, what I would consider the high priority, about 10% or around 100 poles, that's what this number represents. To replace a pole on an existing system is somewhere between $1,800 to $2,000 contractor price, installed and replaced. This is 100 poles, $2,000 a piece, plus engineering and administration fees of around $50,000. That's where I arrived at the $250,000 figure. Again, how many of those you want to do determines where that price point is. The east cooling tower, again, as I said, it is serviceable, but it requires a lot of maintenance. So there's holes in it, it leaks, it's been patched. They continue to patch it.
Yeah, every year we just keep it together. I mean, it works, but it's an ongoing deal that's never going to get better.
Yeah, the pans are rusted out, so they're patched with tar and fiberglass and everything else, and it's supposed to be a stainless steel, but it works. But it's probably something that if you want to maintain the engines in good working condition, that should be replaced in a fairly short order of time.
You mentioned stainless steel.
Yeah.
The new one should be, or the old one is, and they're not patching with stainless steel?
No, the old ones are not stainless steel.
Yeah, the new one would be.
Yeah, you can buy galvanized. I would suggest you put stainless pans in there. The structural parts can be galvanized, but the pans really should probably be stainless. Or in 15 years or 10 years, you're going to be right back here again. So.
Is there a reason we couldn't put stainless pans in the existing framework?
You probably spend more repairing it at this point on those units than it would take. There are structural places also that are rusting on those units. Yeah, it's not just the pans.
Thank you.
Cooling tower is $40,000 to $60,000, and installation is about that same amount. Again, I didn't get hard bids on there. I got a price from Marley for what the price is, and I talked to a couple of installers, and they gave me that range. So we talked about the generation controls. It's a fairly expensive upgrade to go to the modern controls. That's one of those things that it needs to be looked at as how often do you think you're going to use the engines and what their use is going to be on the value of that to the operation. The more you use it, the more valuable this becomes. It's tough to say and what the environment's going to be over the next 5 years, how often you're going to be called to generate and keep the assets working. If you add these 6 items together, that ends up about $800,000. The reason it adds up to about $800,000 is a lot of the grant matching funds. The maximum amount of a grant is like $400,000, and it's a matching grant fund. And so I tried to limit that first year priority to that amount. So if a grant was approved for the full amount, then that would allow you to take advantage of the maximum amount of grant available. And that would be more of the higher priority items that would get you in pretty good working shape.
Phase 1 would be.
That's phase 1, yeah.
Which is the 8065.
Yes. Phase 2 is the next level of overhead distribution improvements. That next 100 poles to get you up to where now you're up to 90% of your system is in really good shape. And the west cooling tower has serviceable life. It needs to be replaced at some point, but you're probably out there 5 years or more. But again, if you get a grant in the short term, you need to make an economic decision. Do we spend the money in a year or two or not? If grant funds are available, if you can get matching funds and get it for half price, does it make economic sense to do it now or to wait until you get to where you're at with the east tower now and you're repairing it every year? So that's really an economic decision that doesn't need to be made this year at all. But it would be my recommendation that you seriously consider looking at requesting the full grant amount, see where that all shakes out. If you get grant funding, then we can get into the next level of saying, let's really nail it down, specifically which projects, which poles, do a little additional engineering, and come back with really hard figures so you know exactly where you're at, what makes the most sense, very specific projects. If grant funding is not available, then you might need to back up and let's step back, and instead of doing a 1-year plan, maybe we need to do like a 5-year plan. What needs to happen in the next 5 years? What needs to happen in the next 10 years? So you still have a path to the future of what needs to happen, and you have a roadmap to follow that you can do as different funds allow, different projects come up.
And those grant funds are subject to the low and moderate income.
Yes.
And how are we doing with the response? We're going to have to do another mailing or contact people individually. We are at 21%, and we need to be at 51% to qualify. So we've got a ways to go.
Any questions for Chris? So our next step is
get into the qualification point, and then as a part of the application process, then you can reference this document that says here is our assessment of what needs to happen, and if there needs to be any tweaking, we can work with the grant people to provide any additional documentation that they may have as you work through that process.
Rural development, or do you know?
That was the CGV grant.
CDBG?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was.
appreciate your assessment. It's very thorough. And I guess we'll just have to work towards getting our.
And like I say, if the grant situation doesn't follow through, the additional effort to, so we had a budget to do this assessment of like not to exceed, I think we were at $8,000. We're less than that now. So we still have money in that original funds to make that into a 5-year plan and still stay under that original amount. So if we need to convert that, if we need to work the grant writer, we're still under that original approved amount. So.
What I would suggest is that if this doesn't go through, there's a couple of those things that need to be done. You need to probably have a good map. That's necessary for this FEMA thing. If we ever have a major disaster, we need to have a good map of where everything's at. And for years, we've been talking about having an inventory of things, knowing what we got out there, and we never really have had an inventory, and this would be a good way to at least have an assessment of exactly what we have in the field. The ARC study is probably for the safety of our people and for anybody working around our machinery, we need to have that done. And we'll be in compliance, because if we would have electrocution, then that's going to be the first thing they come to us and say, did you have that done? And we're going to say no, and then they're going to slap us with fines. The third thing then, I think we really have to address the vice standards one way or another, whether we're going to determine whether it be one engine, 2 engines, all 3 engines, or what level of those we feel we need to have monitored. Because I don't think with our current contract that we have, we get such a low price on our interruptible power that we buy, it is still going to be worth an investment to have our engines in good working order and be subject to probably running whenever we need to. So that's something that really need to look at. So that's my 3 cents for that.
The third one you mentioned, you're talking about the Cadillac converter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are the 3 things that really need to be done. So you're probably looking at a $200,000 investment, whatever happens at some point, just to get the bare minimum done.
Yeah.
And back in the day, I think if you go back and we trace it out, and we'll have to look, when that was put in, the city, I believe, paid for that when Westar Energy owned it. So and then we had to give it to them. So we've already paid for that thing once, and I would hate to have to go pay a full price for another one. If they would, I guess I would like to swap that one out and they give us a bigger one, and then they can take that and put it on some other city or some other unit or wherever somebody else needs one. But they should give us a hell of a deal on it, because we basically the city paid $400,000 for that transformer unit and substation back in 1992 or 91.
Yeah, I think the unit's 92.
I think, and I'm pretty sure the city paid $450,000 or thereabouts for it, and then we had to donate it to Westar, because at that time they made us pay for it. So I know it's probably property of Midwest Energy, but I think we need to maybe go back. I don't know if we have our records back that far, whether we could go back.
We have our minutes.
I think we need to go back and maybe look and see if the city did in fact have to pay for that, then we ought to be able to have something to show them and at least have an argument point when we talk with them.
Yeah, see, if you had to pay the whole thing, you're probably looking at $200,000, roughly, maybe a little more for the transformer. But like I said, there's no way you should have to pay the full price, because the transformer that's there has value. There's nothing wrong with it. So even if you had to pay the net difference, it should be well less than that.
I think Stafford had put in there. They had to put in there. They didn't blow that one out last year.
Yeah.
So I mean, they've already gone through that with the one that's provided. I mean, they got too hot, and so
And you think that was with Westar, not Midwest?
it was with Westar. Well, I've been Westar, it would have been KPNL.
KPNL, but I mean,
Probably back then.
it was actually technically before Westar, but it would have been KPNL at that time.
I believe that's the history on it, but I mean, that's
Okay,
been
I'll
20
try
years
to
ago.
find
So.
it.
And
Thank you,
if,
Chris,
yeah,
very
and if any
much.
questions come up, get them through Mel, you can get through me, I can answer anything else. If you guys think of something later or have another question, just run it through Mel and he'll get with me and we'll answer it however we need to.
That sounds good. Thank you
All right.
very much, Chris.
Thank you, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think the next was, you'd requested a
Yes, I think it may be the same thing you and your,
With the girls, okay.
yes.
All right, so, Tia and Allison, you guys like to come forward, please? Welcome to sit down as well, or stand up, whatever you prefer.
Good evening, I'm Allison Smith. And I'm Tia Smith.
And
Connie would like to
With-
apologize.
With who?
We're lifeguards
With
for
very
the
good.
St. John Pool. Connie would like to apologize. She had to attend a pool party. So if you guys have any questions about any of this or anything to do with pool, just call her. We're here this evening to talk to you guys about the possibility of raising our pay.
Because it's a trained position and we have to pay for our training, which we have to pay $150. We'd like to be paid minimum wage. And my parents don't really want me working once school starts, but I'm trying to convince them that it's worth working for school during school.
Me and Tia are the only two lifeguards left, with Connie and Angie, and then one sub. That means that we have to work all day, all the hours, all the parties. We do not get paid overtime. Sometimes we work over 40 hours due to other guard schedules, but now that everyone is leaving for college, we will be the only ones working a lot of hours. Other communities around us, they get paid $7.25 an hour. I'm having to give up my job at Mary's for 3 weeks, and there I'm getting paid more and tips, and I want to help out the pool as much as I can.
But you're giving up the job at Mary's to fill in at the pool.
Yes.
Let's make that clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're being generous, right?
Yes.
Even though our parents are against the time and energy that we're going to be putting into this, we're thankful for the job you guys have given us, and we want to be able to keep the pool open and feel it would be more worth our time if you guys consider this. Thank you for your time.
I have a question.
Yes.
Who do you pay for $150 of training?
Candy Teichman. She
instructor.
was the one who trained me. I don't know if she trained
Staff, staff.
She's the instructor.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know Candy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I just didn't know whether it was just a CPR class or what it was.
No, it's their-
CPR and lifeguard training.
And it's for 3 years, right?
Your lifeguard, yes. Your CPR, you have to get certified every year.
So is it an additional every $150 every year?
No, your CPR is
It's
3 years. 50 every year.
Every 3 years, it's $150,
Okay.
and then after that, every year it's $50
I see.
to keep the CPR up.
Okay.
Anybody in CPR training has to do CPR.
Basically, you work for free for a while. Well, that's paid off.
How much are you making now?
She's been out, we need to discuss that in the executive session. But you, how long have you been a lifeguard? Allison?
It'll be my second year.
Second year, and this is Tia's first year.
So basically, with everyone gone, the burden is on them. There's no, they're working every day, every shift, and we need to decide if we want to up their pay. But I think the question I have, though, is even if we do something with your hourly wage and your parents aren't wanting you to do this, what's the outcome going to be? Are you, I mean,
I think my parents will be more willing to let
Yeah. Okay, well, we will discuss it in executive session, and someone will get back with Connie.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much, girls.
So you girls are welcome to go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so.
10 minute executive session, for non-elected personnel to discuss, okay.
Well,